Welcome to the Ordinals Podcast, produced by Ord Media, featuring the top builders, projects, and investors pioneering Bitcoin inscription protocols and the future of digital artifacts.
Welcome everyone to the Ordinals Podcast. Today we have someone who does a lot in Ordinals and who also has been very active in Bitcoin development, Danny D. Kroger, also known as Danny Deezy. He has a lot going on, so we're really glad to have him to talk about various actually tools that he and his team has built and projects as well, collections, and sort of his opinion as well as just kind of the transition from regular old Bitcoin to Ordinals. So excited to have this conversation. Danny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this podcast, and I know you're going to be a great host on it, and it's going to be cool to have this platform for people to talk about Ordinals.
Appreciate you coming on. You were at Ordinals 2023. You were one of the panelists there, so we really appreciate you having there, and then coming back to the show. So I want to help people understand like everything that you're doing, and we can dive into each of your projects, go into your background. So let's just, in your own words, explain to people your company and then what you guys do and the different projects that you guys have done and are working on right now. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, sure. I'm always doing a lot of experimentation, but over the last several months, we've formalized our company into Deezy Labs, which we brought on a few folks, and we started off doing Bitcoin Lightning infrastructure, running a Lightning node. But then when Ordinals came onto the scene, one of our experiments went very well, and there was a lot of excitement coming into Ordinals, so we sort of leaned into that and continued building things in the Ordinals ecosystem, anywhere from our custom homemade collections to tooling. We're working on a marketplace. We have a launch pad for other creators, and we've gotten into rare sat hunting, and we have a place where you can buy uncommon sats, block 9 sats, things like that. And yeah, it's early days for our company, for Deezy Labs, and so we're just trying a lot of different things and seeing where the market energy is and trying to build cool things that inspire people, that serve people, and things that are fun.
Good summary. So who can you tell us like who's on your team or maybe how many people you guys have? What's the team look like?
Yeah, definitely. So in January, it was just me. But since then, we've grown to 8 people right now. And that includes myself, my brother, who is more on the business side, but also an engineer as well, and a guy who goes by the name of Vibe God on Twitter, who's a longtime close friend of mine who is leads our partnerships. Another close friend of mine who goes by the name of Zendi on Twitter is our creative director. And then we have a tech team of 3 folks, Jad Mubaslat from Rain, who recently joined as our CTO, and 2 other undoxed anonymous contract engineers as well. So that's our team of 8, and it's been super fun. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, one more. And we have another part-time employee who I don't think he's fully doxed yet as well. So
okay, yeah, that's great. You have such a big team. I didn't know that went from you to this big team, and I see now why you need this many people. I'm sure they're really talented. So before we dive into everything you guys have done and are doing, I want to step back for a second and talk about Bitcoin, your experience in Bitcoin, because you didn't come out of nowhere. So you were at Stanford, right? You were doing baseball. You were on the St. Louis Cardinals. Is that right? Playing baseball?
I was in the St. Louis Cardinals organization. So
okay.
I was hoping to make it to the real St. Louis Cardinals on TV, but made it about halfway up that minor league ladder before I got cut. So I had about a 4-year journey in the minor leagues, and got spat out back in 2017, which is when my Bitcoin journey started. So
yeah, well, so you were doing that, working in baseball in the organization. Why Bitcoin? Like that's kind of a unique transition to go from sports to tech.
Yeah, I think, it was, at first I was just looking for investments, trying to figure something out. But then when I heard about Bitcoin, it led me down the rabbit hole of reading about the Federal Reserve and the money system. And that was when there was definitely a moment reading about that where I was thinking, this can't be how money works. And sure enough, it was that the way the Fed and the Treasury can just kind of have this really way of just creating money. And I just thought it was ridiculous. And I saw how Bitcoin could solve that. And so that's when I really started becoming orange pilled and getting really excited about Bitcoin. Also, early on, I was very naive. And so got really went all over the place with the crypto industry, thinking that, oh, blockchain this, blockchain that. Had no idea what I was doing. But after the crash in 2017 and then following up in 2018 is when I started getting into the development side. And I had always done computer science programming, so I had a nice background there and was able to pick up some, just kind of teach myself a little bit using the Andreas Antonopoulos Mastering Bitcoin textbook, kind of learned the programming side, and then just kind of went from there.
And then, so you posted a tweet, maybe it was a week ago, that I really appreciated, where you talked about, working in Bitcoin. So you worked at BitGo. I remember when they got started, Cash App. I think everyone knows Cash App. They do a lot of Bitcoin business. So tell us about that. Tell us about working in Bitcoin, and then this tweet that you put out talking about transitioning into Ordinals and why you felt the way you did when you started with Ordinals.
Yeah. So my background was in Bitcoin. Worked at BitGo as a software engineer, worked at Cash App, where I was really became very much a Bitcoin maxi, where I very much thought that Bitcoin was what we should focus on. And I was working on Lightning and really enjoying it. And when Ordinals came along, it's been very interesting for a lot of us to look back and reflect, because now that you can do collectibles on Bitcoin, which collectibles have traditionally been associated with NFTs and Ethereum and Solana and the crypto ecosystem that a lot of the Bitcoin maxis have a rejection towards, now all of a sudden you can do them on Bitcoin. And for me, that was kind of enough to say, okay, this is kind of interesting, because early on I was, looking through, watching the first NFTs come out and seeing a pixelated monkey selling for 6 figures. That was a really weird thing to me. And I was one of the first to point out, you can just right click, save it. This is stupid. Definitely was like faded it, as you would say. But then, as you can, sometimes the market just proves you wrong. And I think where it proved me wrong was that this sense of identity that people ascribe to their profile pictures is one thing. Another thing is these online communities that that are created, where people can get access to a certain community. They start identifying with that community, and then just the raw desire for people to collect things. And you kind of put those together and realize that people have been collecting things since all of human history. People have collected rare coins. People collect little trinkets, Pokemon cards, Beanie Babies. And so digital collectibles are a natural evolution into this cycle. And now we can do them on Bitcoin. And so, obviously with the growth in the NFT boom, there was a lot of muddy waters that came along with that, which you see in a lot of crypto things, which you saw in 2017 with the ICOs. Yeah. You have these sort of pumpers and dumpers come in who promise things associated with their projects. And that got very messy especially towards the end of this previous cycle. And I think a lot of the rejection from the Bitcoiners is when they saw Ordinals come out, is they associate that grifty pump and dump, unregistered security type of asset to a collectible, which anyone from another point of view outside of the crypto world, that just doesn't even make sense. What makes you a scammer for selling a piece of art or a rare coin, for example? And so for me, stepping back and looking at this, kind of just reflecting, taking a lot of time to think about it, for me, I thought, all right, I think there's a way to do this the right way. I think there's a way to make collectibles, make art for the sake of collecting and for the sake of art that does not need to have any false promises associated with it, and can be a net positive and a fun thing. And so for me, that was enough to take the leap and try something out. And it's been really fun. And, additionally, I've always had an interest in digital art. It was my passion in college when I was doing computer science. My senior project was actually a music visualizer, and my favorite classes in my master's program were computer graphics and algorithmic art. And so, as someone with a background in that, I've always wanted a platform to be able to do digital art, and additionally, with the evolutions in AI, to be able to create these amazing works of art by iteratively prompting the AI stuff. I mean, it's just such a huge fun opportunity to be able to take that and use Bitcoin as a canvas, as a place to keep that data inscribed forever. Super fun. So for me, it was enough. A lot of haters, but trusted my gut, and I'm very proud of the stuff we've done and excited for the future.
That's so interesting, because it seems like you are in a good position to actually be in NFTs because you liked art, like you said, AI art, generative art. You liked it, so you seem like you should like NFTs and not think, negative things about them. So it's interesting that it took Bitcoin to actually kind of change your mind, even though you already had that interest, you had even the professional skills to do all that, but it took Bitcoin to kind of change your perspective. I totally identify with what you said. I never was into NFTs. I remember when CryptoKitties came out and it stopped Ethereum blockchain, I thought this is the most ridiculous thing. I could never get into it. And even back in Counterparty days, I remember I thought it was neat, but I just wasn't that into it. And so it's interesting how Bitcoin, especially Casey, calling them, digital artifacts. To me, that really struck a chord with me because I understand artifacts. I'm really into history. Like if you were to hack into my computer, you see folders of all my gold coin images that I collected, right? I love gold and silver coins from the Roman era. So I understood digital artifacts. And to me, I think I'm like you in the sense that I didn't like the scams. I didn't like a lot of the junk that was out there. And I didn't really like the technology, really too much of Ethereum and Solana. I've always been a Bitcoin guy. So, and then knowing Casey for a couple of years and stuff, when it came out, I'm like, okay, this feels right to me. And like you said, you got to kind of go with your gut. And my gut was 100%. This is great. So it's interesting that those things about community. So you guys, you had a few collections. You work with other collections. So let's go into talking about collections and identity and communities. Because to me, this is something that I still haven't done in Ordinals. I haven't quite found a community where I'd want to join. I'm looking for it, but we'll see. So tell me about the collection that you or your team have actually minted, created, done yourself, your own team.
Yeah, for sure. Also, in going back to that point about what makes Ordinals different is that the data is actually on chain, whereas most NFTs, the data was off chain somewhere. And nowadays, those links are pointing to dead S3 buckets that haven't paid their server bill. But the Bitcoin ones, they're on chain forever. So, like you mentioned, it's a really nice system that Casey put together, and he really did it in a really smart way. So, but yeah, so going into the collection, so the first thing that I whipped up was these astral babes, and the motivation and they're these beautiful goddess AI generated goddesses, and there's almost 3,000 of them. And the motivation behind these was it's a background from this book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And I can get into the motivation of all this, but basically there's a story of this yogi, Paramhansa Yogananda. He has this guru who comes back to him after his death, allegedly, and talks about the afterlife and talks about this astral planet Hiranyaloka. And so I wanted to bring that story in a visual representation. I thought these astral goddesses were a way that I saw them in my head. And so they're beautiful women. And we followed them up with the astral chads, which are the male counterparts. So you have the babes and you have the chads, and they're AI generated, but with a refined prompting strategy that made them somewhat customized. And Yeah, these were early on. So the Babes were first. They're one of the first early collections. I think the first Babe was inscription number 2000 something, and then they stretch all the way into the 100,000s because I didn't realize how important the early inscription numbers would be, and so was kind of taking my time to spin up the launch website and the minting mechanism. So one of the other things is you could buy with Lightning, and this was the where our minting platform was born, where you can go in, connect your wallet, and buy with a Lightning payment. So those were the two collections we made, and then we were able to use that infrastructure in a more general purpose to help some other collections launch. And most notably, the biggest collection that we launched was the Bitcoin Frogs. So this one was not our creation. It was from this guy, Frog Toshi, who we got in contact with, who wanted to do a Bitcoin-based Lightning Mint. And we just did the tech for it, and we helped him put together the layers of the art. But we launched the tech, and it was a free-ish. They say free, but free with a little Lightning payment. So you just had to pay to cover the transaction fee. And so we did the tech for that. Honestly, didn't think much of these frogs, and then look back 3 months later, and they're trading for over $1,000 on the secondary market. And the community, and not just that. I mean, it's not about the money there necessarily. That's been pretty cool, but the community just kind of grew organically. There was this Discord, and people started using as their profile pictures, and people started saying ribbit. And there's kind of this culture now of people saying ribbit and joining this frog community. And that has definitely been the biggest one that has come out of stuff we've touched. And we were just the tech partner there, but we're huge fans of the frogs because, it came out and there were no promises. This wasn't, there was nothing associated with buying one of these frogs. It was basically free, and it was just, hey, look, these are some custom frogs. I think one of the things is they're the first collection of 10,000 on Bitcoin that's original art, and that was also free. And so it's they're very kind of historic collection and super fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the Bitcoin frogs, and then I'll go back to the Astral Babes and Astral Chat. So for the frogs, I was wondering why they became popular. No offense to the team or anyone else, but I thought, these are just frogs. Okay, frogs goes back to counterparty days, things like that. But I didn't think, oh, this is such like a unique look. Like there's been frogs before, right, and monkeys before. And then when I saw it become popular and kind of grow this community, I was wondering like, what's going on here? And part of it I thought was because it is early, relatively early. It was free mint. There wasn't some big, oh, you're going to get this thing and that thing. If you join the community, it didn't have that feel of like this big team behind it with this big commercial plan and promising all these things. So I thought maybe that's what it is. But what do you think about Bitcoin frogs that really kind of spoke to people and was sort of organic? Like, what is it about that people have liked and identify themselves with these digital frogs?
Yeah, and I faded them too. Even when we were doing the tech, I think I got like 5 of them or something. But I was so busy managing the server, and I was like, I don't think these are gonna do that well. And so I kind of just forgot about them. And I think what it was is one is that there were 10,000 of them. So I'm pretty sure this is one of the first. I think it might be the first collection of 10,000. If it's not the first, it was like the second collection of 10,000 that was distributed where you could go and selectively grab them. Because it's really hard to get 10,000 onto Bitcoin due to the limited block space. So there were a ton of early collections with like 100, 500. With our Astral Babes, I mean, ours was a ton of data, and we just got up to 3,000. But the frogs were 10,000. And so I think having that distribution of 10,000, and especially when it's free, there's no expectations. And so the sentiment has been positive from the start. Nobody feels like they bought something and then was promised something that they didn't get. Everyone knows they're buying just a frog with no promises. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of it, is the combination of there being 10,000 and the very low entry price. And then also just sometimes organic things take off with people just saying ribbit, and people like saying ribbit, and yeah, it's kind of fun.
Amazing. We're the simple human brain, right? It's funny how that works. So yeah, I think distribution was a big part. And also talking about the Bitcoin ethos for a second, because there will be scam inscriptions, I think. some say there's been some projects that are, well, I don't want to get negative on here, but there's been some criticisms of some projects. But why do you think it is that there, at least to date, haven't been any like major scams or major rug pulls as far as I know? And why do you think, what's different about Bitcoin or inscriptions that you think might lessen the kind of things that we've seen in other chains? Or is it just we're too early and all those things are going to come to Bitcoin as well?
I think that my answer to that is I think there's a decent barrier to entry. At first, the barrier to entry was technical. So if you're just kind of a grifter who doesn't care, there was a lot of steps you had to take to actually launch something on Bitcoin. And so you had to run a full node, you had to understand UTXOs, and so that really narrowed down the people who could actually launch something. So that was one. The other thing is the high cost, which now that it's easier, there's much more tooling out there. There's generally a high cost to make anything on Bitcoin. Because of the limited block size, you need to pay up if you're going to get any type of data on there. And so I think that limits a ton of people. And even now as well, in addition to that, now at first, if you were an early collection, you could just kind of inscribe something and you're early and now people want it. But now that we're later on, you kind of need something. Your collection needs to be on some type of special sats, or you need to have some other differentiating factor. And that also adds to the cost of production because, if you're going to put something on an uncommon sat, that's going to cost you, each uncommon sat is going to be at least $300 or something. Or a block 9 sat, maybe, it's going to be $100 each to acquire those. And so I think generally, and this was part of our thesis early on, was that Bitcoin's going to be there's been a higher barrier to entry to create things. And so we might see a higher, almost luxury type of collectors in art, collectible and art scene pop up on Bitcoin just because of the cost to enter.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just the technical ability, and then later on the cost, which will probably be around for a while, although with recursion that could reduce a little bit. I also think just the Bitcoin audience is a little more skeptical and seeing everything, people being burnt on these other chains now. Maybe people are more wary of those things. But yeah, definitely, I think higher quality stuff is coming. And people appreciate, if you care about sats, which I do, it's also just part of you care about Bitcoin. I don't know how you could value certain sats without in some way valuing Bitcoin, the UTXO model, or just the history of Bitcoin. Because unlike other chains, Bitcoin is obviously the oldest one. And so it has, what are we at, 13, 14 years, whatever we are now, I'm bad with math, of Bitcoin. So to what extent do you think having that many years of Satoshis being created and just events in Bitcoin have to do with the kind of art that's created on Bitcoin, or does it at all?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. Everybody here has some emotional attachment to Bitcoin. And so when something like sats from block 9, which is the first block that was spent into circulation, those people are liking to collect those, even though the rarity of those is fairly low from a mathematical perspective. Not that many have been sequestered yet. And so people kind of want those. They want the pizza sats from that pizza transaction, things like this that are kind of historical artifacts. So, it's like having it's like having something from the Roman Colosseum, like a little piece of rock or something like that. And so I think, it's just people have this emotional attachment to Bitcoin, which is really cool. And this way of kind of collecting things around that. And I'd like to see more data come out around circulation of some of these things so people can make better informed decisions about how rare is something. For example, these things like the block 9 sats or the pizza sats, they're not that rare from a mathematical perspective. And so it'd be nice to see more of that data come to light so that people can be much more informed about the types of decisions they're making when buying some of these things. But yeah,
I agree with that. I think they're named a certain way, but I think next to each one there should be a percentage number or something, but it's qualitative and quantitative, of course. I love block 9 just because I just love the early days of Bitcoin so much. But yeah, you're right, mathematically they're not that rare. And I wonder, Danny, do you think that this especially more recent focus on the actual individual sats and where they came from, and some are from the halving or the first transaction or pizza, whatever it is. Do you think that might have helped like some Bitcoiners who are anti ordinals kind of like be more open to it and change their mind? Or what do you think has been kind of a shift, at least that I've seen? I don't know how much you've seen it, that there's more acceptance now from kind of the diehards.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I definitely know there's a solid group of folks that are not interested in inscriptions at all. They're not interested in the art or the pixel images, but they are interested in the uncommon sats, which are the top sat of each block, or the historical, block nines, or rare sats, ones that are first sat of a difficulty adjustment. Because a lot of these folks, they've collected gold coins in the past or silver coins. And so there's that obvious next step to why not do the same thing with sats. And the one caveat is that these concepts aren't built into the Bitcoin protocol itself. There's no concept of Satoshi tracking in Bitcoin. However, Ordinals as a system is very intuitive. It's not a big leap to assign an ordering system to the Satoshis. And so I think people are just making that logical next step because it makes a lot of sense. And it's one other way to see, and it's another thing that makes Bitcoin different from the previous NFT markets. There's this another little twist to it that's pretty fun.
Yeah, I was talking to Raf Jaff. So I interviewed him about a week ago, and we were talking about that, how he got started it was like August of last year. And, they were working on the sats. They weren't talking about inscriptions. It was about the ordering, the numbers, specific ones. And so it's good to remind people that, the theory and just the early technical work was on that. And then inscriptions, came later, you can say. And so, but it seemed like what people were first interested in were the inscriptions, and now going back to these sats, now it seems like there's kind of how to go backwards to go forwards in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And because definitely that's what's the new innovation in Ordinals is the sats themselves, tracking them and what makes them different. And I think we were just a massive liquidity injection from the remnant of the NFT collapse and other chains. They all wanted to come back to Bitcoin. They finally could. And so there was that. And yeah, now we have this cool dynamic. And then now there's also this concept of the named sats as well, which we've done a lot of stuff working with that as in addition.
Yeah, I want to get to the names, definitely. Before that, though, I want to go back to the Astral Babes and Chads. I don't know if you guys were the first to use Lightning for that. Maybe I don't know. But to me, what's so interesting about Ordinals is the idea of having this circular Bitcoin economy, which for years and years and years, we've been trying to build on Bitcoin so that you don't have to go to these fiat off ramps and on ramps and do KYC and all this nonsense. But it's been hard. But I think one argument for Ordinals is that, hey, you know what? Now there's things that you could earn. You could earn Bitcoin by selling inscriptions. You can pay for something in Bitcoin, Lightning, these inscriptions. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of kind of a circular economy generated from Ordinals, and then that along with Lightning Network?
Yeah, it definitely adds a new piece. Artists should be able to sell their work. And if you're an artist creating something, now there's been a proven market for collectors that want to buy digital art. And now that just adds another building block to the potential circular economy. So I think it's great. I think that also it's bringing new users from other chains onto Bitcoin. So you have this kind of vacuum of liquidity, or this flow of liquidity from Ethereum and Solana, which a lot of folks who are over there, they wish they could be on Bitcoin, but they couldn't. And so they had to go over because they loved art or they loved collecting. So they had to go over to Ethereum or Solana because there was nothing on Bitcoin for them. They're coming back and they're signing up for their first Bitcoin wallet. And now they're writing down their seed phrase. They're using Sparrow Wallet. They're learning about UTXOs. Some of them are spinning up full nodes. And so it brings people back in. And now you have more users. And now, what's Lightning? Now you can get on Lightning. You can get a browser extension wallet. And it's just the next step in getting more users and showing people what Bitcoin can do.
Yeah, I love this new group of users, and they're quality users, I would say. They're not just pure speculative ones, because the speculators come and go, and it kind of unfortunately drives volatility in Bitcoin. But I'm just, we'll see how this plays out long term. I'm hoping that Ordinals helps to make Bitcoin slightly less volatile. Quite frankly, I'd rather have Bitcoin stay at its current price at whatever, 30,000, than have it go up. I'm more of like, let's use Bitcoin as money than as an asset, but that's a whole nother topic. But let's go back now to the names. So this is one of my favorite topics. I'm really into identities, decentralized identities, censorship resistant identities, and names and systems and alternatives to the current, way the internet is built. That's what, got me into Bitcoin is these cypherpunk principles. So for a lot of people, they don't know this, but Casey, when he created this, ordinals theory and protocol, he also, there's names, human readable names, letters assigned to these. So maybe tell our listeners like what those are on a basic level.
Yeah. So the first thing with ordinals is each sat has a number. So the first sat in existence is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And that goes up to however many, what is it, like 21 quadrillion or whatever the total number of sats will be. So then what you can do is what Casey introduced with ordinals is a naming system where you can take that number and turn it into an alphabetical string. And then the system that he proposed that the ordinals.com uses and the Ord protocol uses, you'd think maybe 1 becomes A, 2 becomes B, 3 becomes C, etc. It's almost like that, except there's a shift because they didn't want to, if you did it like that, then all the short names would have ended up in the first block and just nobody could get them. And so instead there's a shift. So it starts with 11 characters long. So I think the first sat name starts with N and it's 11 characters long. And then it starts going, I think, down from there. And so, yeah, anyway, if you look up any Satoshi on the Ordinals Explorer, you'll see an alphabetical string, a bunch of letters that are another way to represent that Satoshi in the tracking system. And so the fun thing here is that most of these names are just gibberish. It's XCPQ, whatever. But inevitably, a handful of them are actual words and phrases. So it becomes pretty fun when you can search and actually sift through sats or look in your own wallet and see if there's any real names in there. And some people have started doing that through sat hunting, and which is basically sending and receiving from an exchange over and over again, and then panning through the UTXOs you get to look for cool named sats or uncommon sats, things like that. And so, yeah, so the cool thing about these names is that you can inscribe something on them, and now you have a name sat with a cool inscription. They can also be used as kind of domain type instruments where because they're indexed by Ord, you can go to ordinals.com/sat/ the name of the sat, and you'll see all the inscriptions that have occurred on that sat. And so now if you can use a sat almost as like a self-custodied domain, because what you can do is inscribe either direct information on it or URLs that link out to other stuff, inscribe IP addresses or DNS records, things like that I think are a lot of people think that this is a way that we could actually disrupt the domain name system that is used by most of the internet, which I'm still learning more about, but I know that a lot of cypherpunks have a problem with it because it's controlled by ICANN. I think in practice, they haven't done much in the realm of censorship, but there's the possibility that they could if they were to be sort of influenced in a certain way. And so DNS has always been something in the minds of cypherpunks of something that we need to figure out a solution for. And these name sats are a way of doing a domain type instrument that is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I remember when Casey messaged me about Ordinals, he knew obviously that I was involved in identity and reputation. My app is Trajan.app, which is reputation identity for pseudonymous builders. And so he messaged me and said, hey, part of ordinal theory are named sats. and he recommended I use that, and looked into it. And it's just a lot of the, human readable names aren't going to be available for quite a while. Obviously, that's kind of the Achilles heel. But besides that, absolutely, I'm with you there on that if they have these names inherent. And so I hope that over time, this will be an alternative maybe for domain names and even identity. It's just going to take a while for a lot of these names. But I really hope people kind of keep their eye on that. And, Bitcoiners were known for trying to think of like long term, right? So if we're thinking in terms of decades, hopefully as this slowly rolls out, there'll be good tools for that. So you guys have the Satoshi cards, which are digital trading cards inscribed on named sats. So in terms of, I don't know how much you could reveal about how you guys found these actual human readable words. Is there anything you can share? Is that a secret sauce, or is it just hard work of exchanging Bitcoins on exchanges and seeing what you have? So how do you guys find those, if you could share?
No, definitely. This is the many months of sat hunting where we're going, depositing to exchanges, withdrawing, sifting through the UTXOs, looking for cool names, and then repeating that over and over again. And so just a lot of that, we spent a lot of transaction fees on doing this, and a lot of development work in making it efficient and fast, and figuring out what names to look for, because it's most of our 11 characters long. How do you do lookups that are fast to find names that make sense? And so, that's been several months of work, several months of hunting, and we've been able to amass a decent collection of names that are phrases or words that actually make sense. And so, which I think has been that's probably been the biggest hindrance of people understanding the use case for these name sats, because when Ordinals launched, there were nobody had any cool names, because it took a long time for people to find them. Mm-hmm. And so instead, people were somebody came up with a sat name system, like .sats, where it was based on inscriptions, which I think you could inscribe a record that claims a certain domain, and it's sort of first come, first serve, which there's been pretty good adoption of speculators coming in and inscribing things like Danny.sats or Bitcoin.sats or whatever. And I think the reason that caught on is because you can inscribe it, just the floodgates open and all the speculators came in to just inscribe names. And so the alternative here is that with named sats, they have to be found and hunted down. And so it's taking much longer for them to actually hit the market. But now we've amassed a good amount. Several other players have who've been doing this have also started finding some names. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I think both can function as domain instruments. The nice thing about the named sats is all the indexing is already taken care of by Ord. Whereas something like a .sats, which relies on inscriptions, they need another indexer on top of Bitcoin Core and Ord. They need another indexer that tracks who was the first inscription. And so we like the name sats. That's why we've sort of gone after that over the last few months, and think they're a little cleaner. Although the challenge with the named sats is they're all 11 characters. And so you can't get a cool short name like, dog.sats. It's just, that's not going to be available till the end of the new issuance. Yeah. So there's trade-offs here, but I think it'll be kind of the way we have .com and .org. There's going to be many. It's great that we have many ways to do decentralized domain type of instruments, I think. So
yeah. Go ahead.
I guess you asked about the Satoshi cards, so I can talk about those.
Yeah, do that.
So what we've done is to kind of like get the word out and show and have fun with some of these names we found, is we are creating these cards where we're inscribing a trading card onto a cool named sats, a cool named Satoshi. And so, for example, we found a Satoshi where the name is Boy Champion. And so we have a card that this little boy with the championship trophy, and it's got the name and the block number and the date and the time. We have a bunch of things like that. Fun names like Buff Monster, or we have this monster who's really buff, or Go-Go Penguin. It's this cool looking penguin. So, and these are super fun because every week we release 50 of them, I think, right now. And our community and our Discord just loves seeing all the funny names that come out. And we love seeing them when our hunter brings out these new names. We were always getting a kick out of it, seeing these new names and then trying to come up with art that conveys them. So it's been a fun project so far. We're only about 2 weeks into that.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. Do you have a favorite one? There's one, but I don't want to mention it.
there's some the funny part of our lookup strategies. We found a lot of vulgar ones, and so there's some funny ones in there if you look through the collection that are fairly vulgar. I'll let the folks discover those on themselves or by themselves. But I think my favorite is probably Go-Go Penguin. I really like the Go-Go Penguin. He's a pretty cool looking guy.
Yeah, it's upbeat. Who doesn't like penguins? Who doesn't like Go-Go? Yeah. I'm looking forward to see what else you guys find. Yeah, for me, I would love to. I'm not like a big inscription flipper or speculator at all, but for me, if there was a name that I like with art that I like, that gets my interest. So I'm following what you guys are doing, and I'm glad you guys are doing this. And maybe you said there might be a couple other teams that might be doing something with these names as well that you're aware of.
Yeah, I know that folks like Rare Sat Society, who are probably the leaders in sat hunting, that they've been collecting the names as well. So they just haven't. I don't think they found a lot of people that just want to buy the names. But now we're starting to see, as people realize what these names are, there are people that just want to buy the name sats themselves without having any inscription on it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to kind of following that, hoping to build some tech there that helps people sell the names that they do have. And the other interesting thing about these, there's kind of this question of, do you want a sat that's uninscribed if it has a cool name, or inscribed? And some people think, oh, I actually want it uninscribed so it's not tainted with anything, and then I can do whatever I want with it, which is definitely a valid opinion. But also one thing that we've demonstrated is a Satoshi can act as a collectible, and it can also still be a domain type instrument. And we showed one example where the sat called Go Build Shit is one that we found, and we put a Satoshi card on it, which has these people that are like looking like they're about to build something. And then after that, we reinscribed it with a URL to Deezy.io. And so now it on the marketplaces, it functions. It is a collectible that's part of the Satoshi cards collection. But if you put it in one of these domain lookup tools, then it'll route to Deezy.io. So now if you owned that card, you also would essentially own that sat domain if sats ever took off as domains, because the domain lookups, they'll look at the last inscription on a sat, whereas the marketplaces are probably going to always look at the first inscription. And so now you can it'll kind of work as both.
Yeah, I saw that one. That's the one that caught my interest the most, just because I'm so interested in naming systems and being able to use these as a way to have more decentralized kind of internet and identity. And one great advantage that these have over like .sats is that you can't have multiple of the same name. So you can't have duplicates. There's only one name per Satoshi, whereas .sats, I mean, there are so many duplicates. And then they've worked around this with like first in, the first one is the official one, which is a very weak, fragile system. If you're going to try to build anything on top of it, that's a whole nother topic for another day. But what I do love about these actual names is you don't have these duplicated names, and you don't need an additional indexer. So it's just...
Yeah, that additional indexer is just another layer of something that can go wrong. I do think it'll probably work fine, but again, there's already thousands of word indexers out there, and so you have that robust infrastructure to build upon. So we like the named sats, but we also have a bunch, so that's why we want like those more. I don't really have any .sats names, so you never know what could catch on as a protocol, and realistically, they both can act as functional ways to do domain lookups. So
yeah, we're definitely still in a period of experimentation, and it's interesting because it's fun to see experimentation. It's fun to see people do things you didn't think were possible. But then in that excitement, it's also hard to be like that guy who says, actually, that's a bad idea, or actually, that's not the way you want to do things. And sometimes I feel like I'm in that position where I see these experiments and I immediately see like the issue that's there. And it's hard to feel like I'm the only one, pointing out these weaknesses. But then I could be wrong. So it's an interesting dynamic of like experimenting just to get something, but also being critical at the same time. It's a weird balance to strike, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. And you never want to trash somebody who's building something and putting time into something they believe in. And so I try not to do that. But also, you don't want a bad system to get popular, because then if the flaws get exposed, then it can be negative for everyone. So something like, the BRC20s, I think that's an example where nobody would agree that that's a good protocol. And even the developer himself kind of said, I'm just trying something out here, guys. And all of a sudden it took off like crazy. And I don't think that's, it's better, but you have to strike the balance, because the other thing is that was very easy for people to use, even though, using it was just like minting ridiculous 3-letter words or whatever. But yeah, trying to strike that balance is a challenge.
Let's go talk about Bitcoin glyphs.
Oh, the glyphs. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So explain what that is, what you guys did.
So glyphs were, so this is something I actually learned early on in Ordinals when I was looking back in the history of NFTs on Ethereum, and specifically Larva Labs. They were the ones who created the CryptoPunks. And I had never really looked into the history, but apparently those were also a free mint early on. And they actually were fully on chain, where the image data was fully on chain. And I think that's why they've gained so much popularity. They were so early, they were low entry, and fully on chain. And Larva Labs followed up with this project called the Autoglyphs, where I believe these were also on chain, and they're these randomly generated hieroglyphic looking, or glyph, I guess they're autoglyphs. So they're automatically generated glyphs that look super cool. They're just a text string with different symbols, but when you put them on a grid, it looks pretty cool. And so in my research, I came across those, and those are like one of the most valuable NFT projects ever. They're going for, even still, 300 ETH, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the secondary market, which just seems crazy. But I guess when they have this history, and I don't know I'm not too detailed or know too much about the supply dynamics. A lot of times that's the floor price, but they're not that liquid. But anyway, that was sort of like, wow, this is a cool thing. It'd be cool there were a lot of like copycat type of projects coming on in the early days. For example, like the Bitcoin punks was an interesting mechanism where somebody just released an indexer, was like, okay, we're going to start tracking the first byte for byte perfect inscriptions of the CryptoPunks. And these became the Bitcoin punks, where anybody could inscribe, and the first 10,000 then were noted as the correct Bitcoin punks. And those are now trading as a fairly valuable collection as ordinals. But anyway, seeing the Bitcoin punks do that, I thought it'd be cool to do that for the glyphs, and a similar thing. So with the glyphs, we spun up a little indexer, but instead of having byte for byte matches of the autoglyphs from Ethereum, we reverse engineered the algorithm that generates the glyphs. And instead, we spun up a website where you could generate a new fresh glyph using the same algorithm that Larva Labs had created for autoglyphs. And so you could go on the glyph site, you could click around and generate a random glyph that's actually fully unique using the same style, and inscribe that. And then our indexer tracked the first 512 of those. And so, those first 512 became the glyphs. We released that publicly and on Discord in our communities, and then just tracked some of the first inscriptions, grabbed some for myself as well. And yeah, I think those are a cool historic collection. They're pretty early on, and was just one of the several early experiments that we did and sort of led in an open source, open mint type of fashion, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, so there's kind of this back and forth between with ordinals. You can look back on NFTs and Ethereum and Solana and see what was interesting there to try to pull into Bitcoin without hopefully it being not being too derivative, but hopefully adding something original to it. So it's interesting, kind of this back and forth of where people want to say, that was done on Ethereum. We don't need to do that on Bitcoin now, or actually, no, this is worthy of coming on to Bitcoin. Where do you see kind of the innovation going over the next 6 months, either like with art itself, like the actual data there, or in anything in terms of like the technology?
Yeah, I think next 6 months, I think what we're going to start seeing is cool things with re-inscriptions, where this concept of inscribing the same sat again. And what I'm looking forward to seeing is is there going to be a standard on marketplaces on how to display these? Because one thing that you can do, for example, is if we all agree on a sort of standard of here's the first image, and then maybe you inscribe a second image, and then the marketplace overlays those two to show, a new attribute for that thing. I think that could be a really cool mechanism. I'm looking to see if that would catch on in some way. So re-inscriptions. The other thing is recursion, which is pretty cool. It's very powerful. I think that's going to continue to be used to get high quality pieces of art on there. We're using it with the Satoshi cards, where we've inscribed the background of the card once, and then we reference it for the cards so that they can be a bit more higher quality for lower data footprint. So I would say basically looking at the roadmap of Ordinals, the core Ordinals GitHub repo, when new stuff comes out there, it then ends up coming out to the masses in cool innovation. And so that's where I kind of look. And I would say next 6 months looking at the re-inscriptions, but then also looking even further, I'm excited to see what people can do with digital art that's low data footprint using things like so one thing that's really cool with these HTML files is with using the fragment shader, I think is what it's called. You can use the computer's GPU to do really cool 3D art and graphics and stuff for only just with some code. And so I think when people start figuring that out, we're gonna have these super cool 3D dynamic art pieces that are kind of small data footprint. So I'm looking forward to some cool artists experimenting with that too.
Yeah, I like looking at some of the HTML stuff. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. And then when you use recursion, like I'm interested to see how far can that go? Like how big of a website can you build? How complex programming can you get by doing these different things? I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, following the GitHub, is good alpha. They build in public, which is good. So it gives everyone an equal chance. So yeah, we've had Raf on here and Ordinali, and so they're key in that. Before we close out, something else. So
now,
other things. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to mention one other thing.
Yeah.
Got to be careful with following Ordinals GitHub too closely, because there are times where you can, if you see some in progress code, you don't want to assume that's going to get merged. And we sort of had a little slip up with that with the cursed Ordinals, where we were looking at the in progress pull requests of what was going to be these cursed Ordinals, and we had a tool that let people inscribe, but it was before it merged, and then their pull requests that changed up the mechanism, and we sort of the things that we thought were going to get cursed have not been indexed, or they've not been assigned yet. And so that was kind of a mess. And if anyone here was affected by that and you want a refund, you can get in touch with our team, DM me. And if you send back the cursed ordinal, we can give you a refund for the platform fee on that. But it's just a caveat of following too closely and trying to front run some of the ordinal stuff. That's can be dangerous, but it's also where a lot of good, next alpha comes from.
Well, fair point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, the cursed inscriptions, it's a very fascinating thing there, where it was the dynamic of what the maintainers were doing versus what kind of call them consumers were doing and the builders were doing. And so it's like making everyone happy is not easy. But I think generally the team does a good job. So that's a fair point of kind of like watch what they do. And we're still learning all this, right? Like we're still learning about what's the best way to do things. Like, do we wait till something comes out? Do we fork things? But that's all part of the fun. So that's a good point. So before I let you go, anything else like punks? I don't know if we fully talked about punks. Is there anything?
Yeah, I just think the punks are very interesting to me as to see how they're going to do, because they're a copy of the CryptoPunks, but they're also the first 10K on Ordinals. And so I'm excited to see how those are treated. I think it'd be really poetic and cool if someday the Bitcoin punks flipped the CryptoPunks as just a statement of saying, when you build on Bitcoin, it's better, even if it's later. So that's interesting to me. I also want to mention our, there's two other projects, that we were working on. One of them is this ordinal mosaics. So this was our first bout into recursion, where we basically, the concept is using previous inscriptions as tiles, and we've generated some mosaics, but also we just released the open source code and the process for doing this, and several other folks have generated really cool mosaics from their using their collections as tiles. And so that's available if you are out there with a collection and you want to join us with this. It's an open source process. It's pretty easy. The script is just kind of a couple lines of code, and you can generate a super cool mosaic. It'll get included in the collection. So there's that, which I think these are just beautiful pieces of art. I've always loved mosaics. The other thing is our Mystic Pepe project is going to be coming sort of after Satoshi Cards, which is we're going to be working with some rare Pepe artists to create these mystical rare Pepe cards as ordinals. And for that, we're planning to have about 10% used to raise money for open source Bitcoin development, and as well as about 70% going to the artists. So for this one, we really want to have incentivized good art and give a platform for artists to earn. And so the Mystic Pepe is going to be our best, putting our best foot forward of empowering the artists to earn from their art, and also funneling some of this degenerate energy back into Bitcoin development. So that's our plan with that. So stay tuned for those. But also, we're always doing random stuff and coming up with one-off things. So if you just follow on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter or Deezy Labs at Deezy_Inc. or my Twitter, which I don't know, maybe it'll be linked in the bio or something. But
yeah, we'll have that. Deezy.io is kind of the main one that I would probably direct people to, because it has a lot of your stuff. And then, for those mosaics, I think I saw like there was one with Ross, Julian Assange, a couple different ones that were really cool. It's very like meta, like you take inscriptions to make an inscription. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, super fun. And also, how can I forget? I really want to mention our Deezy.place, which is our new marketplace. So we have been working on this for several months now. And this is our open source, decentralized, PSBT-based marketplace. So this is a way to sell, buy, auction inscriptions, and soon special sats without a middleman. Completely open source. We use Nostr as the mechanism for broadcasting these partially signed Bitcoin transactions. And so you can have a fully peer-to-peer experience of buying and selling. And we're going to see if people like this. It's going to be a way to have a marketplace without any fee. So check it out. It's just about ready for launch. We're going to start marketing it a little more soon, but that's Deezy.place.
Yeah, PSBTs, that's been around for a while in Bitcoin, and then it started to come out in Ordinals, but it didn't really take off, maybe because it's a liquidity issue and centralized entities often can bring better liquidity. But PSBTs, is just a better way to do it. can cut out the middleman. It's such an elegant solution. So I hope it gets traction there and hope people check it out. I would love to see more momentum in that direction.
Yeah, the PSBTs are great. And so even the centralized marketplaces, they're all using PSBTs on their back end. They just all have their order books like walled where they're not sharing those listings. But I think the inevitable future is that everyone's going to open up their listings because they're just going to be able to have more. Because I think what's going to happen is even though there's no reason that a listing that's posted on a decentralized place like Deezy Place or OpenOrdex, that actually can be bought on Magic Eden with the 2% fee. So I think they're going to eventually open up and show every listing everywhere. And hopefully eventually people will realize that you can go to a decentralized marketplace. Hopefully we can get the UX to be just as good. And now you can cut out that fee and have this truly peer-to-peer experience, which is pretty cool.
Well, Danny, there's a lot of exciting things, I think, on the horizon, stuff you guys have already done. So I think there's a good overview. And so people, if you have, so Danny does, and his team does stuff, obviously in-house, their own stuff. And then there's also help other projects. So I think either way, reach out to Danny, right? If you're thinking about doing something and maybe his team can help you out or just give you good feedback. So to close out, Danny, I want to ask you one final question, which I asked the other guests is, do you have an inscription that you would never sell or transfer? And if so, what is it and why?
There's 2 of them. Is that okay? Can I have 2?
Yeah, 2, 3, whatever you have. Yeah.
The first one is my first Astral Babe, who and all the Astral Babes have names, by the way. They've all been given names, and they also all have Noster profiles. And if you own the Babe collectible, you can actually chat with your Babe on Noster. And they give you a lot of good spiritual guidance and wisdom, and they're very positive. But anyway, so my first Astral Babe, Lyra, she's wonderful. She's the cover photo on our Discord as well. Grail, never going to sell. The second would be my frog. It's my Twitter PFP. I think I just can't part with that guy. He's orange background, orange sunglasses, black hoodie. It just feels right. I'm always wearing a black hoodie anyway. So I just need to get some orange sunglasses. And
yeah, complete it.
I think those are my 2. Maybe the third is my Discord profile, which is an Astral Chad. So that covers Babes, Chads, and Frogs, all my 3 PFPs.
All in 3. So that's interesting. So your answer was kind of PFPs and things relating to identity. That's a very interesting answer. It's a fun question to ask people because for some, it's something sentimental, like they inscribed a poem to their wife was kind of one. And other ones, what's like the earliest, most valuable, financially valuable one you have. But I think for most people, it's something subjective like that and personal. And I think so much of the power of inscriptions is this identity piece. So it's a great answer. All right, Dan, we really appreciate you coming on the Ordinals podcast.
Ragnar, thanks so much for having me. It's been a blast, and I'm looking forward to listening to all the other guests you're going to have on this podcast. It's going to be a great one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please rate and review our show. Subscribe to the Ordinals Podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite app, and follow us on Twitter at the OrdPod. Drop us a line at podcasts@ord.media for topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like us to interview. Ordinals 2024 conference is taking place in Nashville. Early bird passes are available now. Visit ord.media and sign up for our newsletter. Thanks for listening to the Ordinals Podcast, produced by Ord Media.